a long, well-lived life. I think everybody knows me here, so I don't have to introduce myself. I'm the son of the guest of honor tonight. So I wanted to say a few words and tell some of his jokes, perhaps, for the last time, and give the grandchildren and everybody in the room a sense of what kind of man my dad was. He touched so many lives. My father liked and loved everybody, and he was easy to like and love. That is why we are all here tonight. I appreciate all the stories of how great and how funny my father was. So many of you have come from out of town, in some cases way out of town. Let me start by asking a question my father would ask. Why are you all here? Because he's not coming to any one of your weddings. He would love to tell that joke. Why should I go to his funeral? He's not coming to mine. I say it all the time. That's my father's way of thanking everybody here tonight. God knows he did not want to miss a good get-together and catch up on life. So don't waste this time together tonight or over the next couple of days, catching up on all relationships and showing love to one another and laughing with each other. That is what he would have wanted. I'd like to give a special thanks to the Farmingville Fire Department. They have gone out of their way to help my family during this time. My father devoted a certain portion of his life to the firehouse, and he held every officer position all the way up to chief. And only now do I understand what that meant to him. My father loved to engage with other people. The firehouse was a way to engage with vast amounts of other people, both in a serious manner and also a fun way to bring happiness to himself and to other people. When he was chief, they would bring Farmingville's firehouses to other firehouses and have water fights. Just a crazy time. They didn't have to worry about regulations and lawyers. But when the fun was getting a little out of hand, like they always say, there's a good woman behind every general. And I can recall my mother telling my father to shut it down. It turns out my mother was the original general in the fun police. No more water fights after that conversation. My friend Kevin told me some time ago, it was a fun time when your father was chief, but he also told me when it was time to fight a fire, he expected everybody to be dead serious. I was also told recently that my father, as chief, expected everybody to attend the fire department activities. He must have gotten tremendous buy-in from his fellow firemen on this, because I would go to parades and my father would have a sea of other firemen behind him. They would trophy after trophy. I can only now picture his leadership style. He must have had a way about him that if he asked you to do something, you just couldn't say no. It wasn't about the rank. It was about the respect he earned by engaging with all people in a way that made the other person feel heard and feel like they mattered. People below him in rank gave him respect, and people above him gave him respect. As a UPS truck driver, he made friends with the little bosses. And then years later, when the little bosses turned into big bosses, they would seek my father out decades later to catch up and have a conversation with him. It seems nobody got more special treatment as a driver than my father. Only now can I appreciate my dad's superpower. My father's superpower was listening to other people when they spoke. He just didn't listen. He would actively listen to other people. Most people, when they're having a conversation, the person speaking just can't wait to say what they have to say. But that wasn't my father. He would actually hear you. He would actively listen. You felt listened to. You were sure my father heard what you were saying, and you knew you were being heard because he always was looking to inject comedy into every conversation. So he had to listen in order to provide that right amount of comic relief. He enjoyed laughing and making other people laugh. And like I said, he always would find ways to inject comedy into every conversation. That was his superpower. He was put on this earth to make other people happy by always twisting the conversation around a witty or humorous comment. It seemed like my father liked everybody, but that was not totally true. He had another joke about funerals, which involved not liking anybody in the funeral business or the undertaker, because they were sure to be the last person to let you down. My father did like everybody, but you had to demonstrate integrity and honesty. If by your words or deeds you did not display integrity or honesty, my father would decouple from any meaningful interaction with that person. Looking back, my father was not a one-man show. Most times he was surrounded by a close cast of characters. I was able to watch and learn from my father's most meaningful relationships with other men. This taught me, through example, how to be generous and unselfish, and how to be a good neighbor. I got to see and learn how a man is supposed to act towards their fellow man by watching how my father would interact with the likes of my grandfather, my Uncle Donald, Uncle Joe, Mr. Palumbo, and the rest of the Weldon Lane fathers. Whether it was building a bar up the street at the Mitchell house, pouring concrete at the Lurs house, or a ton of other projects at the Palumbo or Cadara house, I learned how to be a good neighbor and a good man by growing up next to these giant gentlemen. It helped that there was always a certain amount of drinking during these projects. So it was work, but it was fun at the same time. As a little boy, watching my father speak to my grandfather, my Uncle Donald, Uncle Joe, and Mr. Palumbo, watching them gave me an introduction on how men interact with other men. Certainly, there was beer to loosen up everybody's tongue. Then the talking and laughing would commence. As I became older, I got to sit at the table and observe more closely the fine art of talking about life and poking at fun at other people, and more importantly, at yourself. Nothing was more fun to my sisters, their boyfriends, and myself than just being on the deck with my father, mother, Uncle Joe, and Mrs. C. Just talking and yucking it up. Teaching my father and Uncle Joe how to play quarters was a real highlight. I'm sure Uncle Joe saw my father get slurry of speech drunk, but I can't recall that. I don't recall that. Nothing is more important or fun to me than finding an excuse to get together with loved ones. I would say my father's favorite excuse to get together with other people was through fishing. He did not do a lot of fishing, but he really enjoyed it. It took him back to the times when he went fishing with his father, working full-time and overtime at UPS, raising 6 kids, and keeping my mother happy. Did not afford too much time to fish with his children and his grandchildren, but we all got to go. I have to give a special shout out to my Uncle Donald, who died way too early. I've seen my father laugh many times, but when my father and Uncle Donald got together, there was hysterical laughter. I remember Irish, Italian, German accents. They would just have a ball speaking to one another. I'm young, I don't know what they're saying. But I remember seeing my father laugh so hard he couldn't catch his breath. I can recount another time my father laughed hysterically. It was the night of my college graduation in my backyard at 9 Weldon Lane. We ordered 4 kegs of beer, and my father helped put all that ice on that beer with me. And he couldn't understand how all this beer was going to be consumed in one night. So on our way to finishing 3.5 kegs that night, my father made people laugh and got to laugh hysterically by the time the night ended. And like I said before, my father had a genuine interest in what other people were doing with their lives. So he was sitting around a group of partygoers and he was asking everybody about which school they were going to. He starts hearing names like Suffolk and Binghamton and Hofstra and Dowling. And then he gets to the sister of one of my friends, and she says, I own a college. My father said, you own a college? She didn't have to go to school. She owned the college. He wasn't even trying to be funny. It just came naturally to him. You could just imagine how the nightmare degenerated. My friend Richie made my father laugh as hard as I ever saw my father laugh. My father actually hung out at the party until dawn the next day when the party finally ended. Richie Kerner may not be perfectly proud of this, but Richie gets the idea to light one of his farts on fire. My father never laughed so hard. He laughed at days and days. He never heard of such a thing. From that moment on, Richie was known to my father as Burner Kerner. The next day, nobody could think about even looking at another beer, especially my friend Timmy, who threw up all over the inside of his Toyota pickup truck. He just opened the doors, and my father comes walking down the driveway, and hands Timmy the hose, and he hoses out his car, opened both doors, hoses out the car. Came down with a beer in his hand. He got along so well with my friends, so many are here tonight. My dad would even play hockey with us. He would just hang around the front of the net and try to score, until one day he got whacked across the hands with a stick, and that ended his street hockey career. It tore the fingernail right off. My dad could take pain like a champ. Speaking of pain, I was there at the end of his life. We were out shopping at a nursery, looking for bushes to plant. There was no agonizing episode of pain, no feeling of impending doom, no anxiety, no sense of worry. He felt a little dizzy, not quite right. His only pain looked to be mild, like he jammed his left shoulder, and then he fainted. There were no hysterics. As the movie inside his brain was fading out, he had his wife and his family around him. At that moment, there was no crazy drama, just a silent crossing to the other side. On his way out, he had one more funny in him. He just had to kick something on his way out, like Jimmy Durante in a 1963 movie. There were no buckets around, because they were all filled with flowers and bushes. But he does manage to kick over this huge vase. It makes a tremendous sound. And it's one of the few jokes that I didn't get right away. Of course, there is grief felt by all in this room. Some feel this grief cut harder and deeper than others. But how can he truly be gone if he lives in the souls of those who are left behind? There are certain traits that are woven into the fabric of his children and his grandchildren and his great-grandchildren. And when you find yourself displaying these traits, that is Dad, that is Papa, living in you. If you crack a joke or come up with a witty remark, that is him coming back to you. The same if you find yourself being a good listener. If you ask yourself, why I can't tell a lie, or why do I always tell the truth? People trusting you, earning and keeping the respect for all people, offering kindness, gratitude to family and strangers alike, being unselfish and generous with your time. This is him coming back to you. Trying your hardest with everything you do. We would do projects together, and good enough was never good enough. it had to be perfect. If you find yourself being a careful driver, that's my father. He was so proud of his 37 years of safe driving with UPS. If you find yourself speeding, well, that was the Lamar in you. If you fall down with any of the above, my father would affectionately blame my mother's side of the family. Oh, that is the Lamar in you. You did not get that from the Brant side. When you finally reach drinking age, or you are sitting around a table doing some responsible drinking, you can think of our dad, your papa. And if things get out of hand, that is definitely the Lamar. Lastly, my father taught me a saying about death. And it goes like this. They say you die twice. One time when you stop breathing, and a second time, a bit later on, when somebody says your name for the last time. I expect he will live for a very, very, very long time. Because he left a very large footprint on the hearts of so many. He lived to 84. He leaves bunches of nieces and nephews behind, great-grandchildren, grandchildren. 6 children, and a beloved and cherished wife of 62 years, my mother. I can't say the other part. He always wanted life around him to be lighthearted, so enjoy the rest of your time over the next day or so and well beyond. Thanks for listening.